Should the American people prepare for a recession?
No. Look, they've been saying this now. Every 6 months they say this. Every 6 months they look down the next 6 months and see what's going to happen. It hadn't happened yet. It hadn't. There's no guarantee that they're going to be. I don't think there will be a recession. If it is, it'll be a very slight recession. That is, we'll move down slightly.
Yeah. Well, first off, that was with the sit down that Biden had with Jake Tapper. Should the American people prepare for a recession? Oh, I just don't know, said POTUS. I don't think you can predict that. Yeah, you can. Quit spending money. Welcome back to the program. Dana Loesch here with you, top of our second hour. Very interesting back and forth. But the whole point, I was sharing this with you yesterday. I think that interview, I guess his people were looking and thinking, whatever we can do to make it as the least bad as possible. That should be, that should be kind of the goal here. We don't want him to step all over himself. We know that there's going to be some tough questions that are going to be asked, but let's, kind of tough. But let's just, keep him away from any kind of weird remarks. So even though I don't think that he really put anybody at ease concerning the economy, I don't think that he made anybody feel better about it. But he didn't have any major horrible, that we would play endlessly on the show and laugh about because he's so inarticulate. But yet, however, at the same time, I also think his remarks were full of, I'm blaming everybody else. He didn't offer any solutions in his remarks as to what he would do to stop this economic freefall. And a lot of people picked up on that. I said yesterday that the top 10 issues for voters, it's interesting because when I went and I was looking at it the first time, basically they said the economy in about 4 different ways. I mean, it's economy and energy. They're very concerned. And immigration. It reminded me 2016 when I was in New York for Fox for election night coverage. And they would bring us, these readouts. And every, like 3 or 4 times a night, they'd bring new readouts. Everybody got their own little package of readouts. I always felt like the person who was in charge of that, by the way, sidebar for the news, that person was like really the MVP because they had to keep track of everything for every single talking head that was on television because they were bringing us up and they would rotate us out all throughout the night, us hitting different aspects of of what Americans cared about for the election. I always thought that they did a really good job of making sure everything was covered. I mean, they even had some Democrats there. And we all got along in the green room, amazingly enough. But I remember when they brought out readouts, leading up to that, I think people were saying that Trump's rhetoric on immigration wasn't going to somehow land with voters. And they had been saying that all through the primary, and then he wins the primary, and then they'd been saying it all through general election. And one of the first things that I picked up on, they brought us there. We had just sat down at the desk and we got plugged in. So when you get plugged in, you always have to keep your mic on and attached to your collar and your lapel mic and all that, your lav. And they have tape on the desk, and your belly button has to be where the tape is. Everybody's got to be for their camera shots. And once you're plugged in, you can't move. Don't think about moving. And at that point, I think it was on a commercial break right before we were going to go on, they had brought us new readouts. And I mean, you have your trusty highlighter. Everybody's got their stuff. Everybody's waiting for the readouts. And it was so fascinating because just like through the primaries, all the readouts, and these were, thousands of people that were surveyed from all parts of the country, Republican and Democrat. The fascinating thing, and this was particularly true in those states that shockingly went for Trump or where Trump had closed the gap between the Republican and between him and Clinton, which no Republicans before hadn't done that. Always in the top 3 was immigration. Immigration. I think at one point I even looked over at Juan Williams and I was like, looks like you were wrong. Look at this. And he's like, well, I see. Apparently. And he was always very nice off camera. But it was really something to see that. And I think it wasn't that Democrats did not know that this was what voters were concerned about. I really believe that they thought that because they have so much favorable coverage on the news, and they have Hollywood, they have network news, they have more than one network on cable news, they have all their surrogates. I actually thought, I really do believe that they believed in their this ability that they thought they had to convince people that immigration wasn't an issue. They thought they'd be able to talk people away from that. And it was really a stunning measure of their not just inability to message, and it was a stunning measure of, I think, the callousness towards the American voter. And I remember making that point that night, because all of the messaging that we had heard from them leading up to this was that anyone who brought up the issue of the border, that it was somehow you were racist, etc. And one of the biggest takeaways, and this also had to any border state, and they asked, the readouts, they ask if you're black, white, Hispanic, Latino, whatever. They want to know everything about you. And there was an inordinate amount of Hispanic voters who had named immigration as one of their top 3 issues because they were concerned about the lawlessness at the southern border. And to watch Democrats just kind of gloss over that and think that they were going to be able to talk the electorate into not caring about it showed just a grotesque, ignorant misunderstanding, not just of the voter, but of their own really prowess. They just did not care, and they expected the voters to follow in kind. And voters didn't do that. And I kind of feel the same thing is happening right now as it relates to their discussion of the economy. You can't go out there and tell people, just like you can't go out and tell them that the border's secure because they see it and it's not. You can't go out there and tell people that you inherited a bad economy and that it was through no fault of your own. You can't go out there and tell people that you don't know why the inflation is so bad. It's probably because of Putin. Voters know who was advocating for the closures of businesses and schools. They remember that it was Democrats who thought it was just absolutely irresponsible to reopen schools. And they went after every red state governor. They went after every Republican official who said to the contrary of lockdown. They said that they were murderers. They were going to get people killed. They were going to create these hotbeds of transmission, that they were going to be these were going to be super spreader events and super spreader locations. They said all of these things. I remember what they said specifically when New York was arguing as to whether or not they should reopen their schools. And there was a comprehensive study that was done. And what they discovered was that it was something like 0.3% of all transmissions were taking place in schools. And that it was uniquely the adults who were going to gatherings in other people's homes or their own and then going to school, and they tested positive. The supermarkets apparently were greater sites of transmission than schools in New York were. And when you had Republicans and more moderate Democrats try to bring this up to the likes of Chuck Schumer and Cuomo and everyone else, they lost their ever-loving minds in face of the data, in face of science. And so now here we are again. And he's saying, I inherited all of this. Dude, you were one of the loudest voices for the total stoppage of the world's largest and strongest economy. And you think that you bear no blame for that? You and your party went after everyone from Ron DeSantis to Greg Abbott. Even Greg Abbott shut down a little bit. And then Democrats are mad. They're trying to act like they're mad at him now, like they were on the other side. Dude, you all were pressuring him to do more. They hated Ron DeSantis. There was a guy who actually left his job to dress up as the Grim Reaper. Did you remember this? And he followed. Anytime there was a Republican event or a beach opened, he was there standing on the beach like a moron. And look all the good it did him. He just looks like, we don't even remember who he is, just some moron who decided to dress up in black robes on a sunny beach. Dumb. So I think that they're making these same mistakes. And I'm totally fine with that. And I want them to keep doing it.